Hello, everyone. My name is Ezra, otherwise known as E-Soup. Today we are reading chapters 157 to 161, A Ballad of Sword and Wine. And sometimes I forget how long it can be, how long it can feel between Wednesday and the next Monday, and I'm definitely feeling that right now because I was just thinking, like, damn, it feels like I have not read QJJ in forever, and that's not even true. But we had a very eventful stream last time with and it the thing that I keep thinking about the most is just like Xiao Chia, like, not only coming out to his family, but then naming Shen Zichuan as the person he's with, which I had thought that he wouldn't want to do because he'd be afraid of them being like, oh no, that's Shen Zichuan, like, he's from the Shen family, so he's bad, and we especially don't like that. But that's not really what happened. And it was great. And it did kind of make things better after Xiao Chia, like, suffering a defeat and getting saved at the last minute and all that good stuff. Hi, Blue. Um, so I have no idea what we're getting into this stream. I also don't know how close we are to Xiao Chia and Shen Zichuan getting to, like, reunite again. Oh gosh, what was the other thing? The thing that happened is then the, what's her name? Lu Yizhe came to see, Shen Zichuan and kind of, like, scope him out. And I believe she left with a very good impression. I think she's left already at this point. Oh, that's right. Yeah, she left, and she gave Shen Zichuan, like a family heirloom kind of, like, bridal gift. And we leave off with him just being like, wait, what? Which is so, oh my god. I loved it so much. Like, what a great stream it was last time. Hi, Vase of Peonies. Oh, Blue, you said, one thing I noticed during my first read was Daddy Xiao seems to know a lot more than it seems about Shen Zichuan at first glance. I immediately clocked that when they introduced him. Ooh, that's interesting. Yeah, like, he's definitely very perceptive. He does seem like that. Now I'm wondering, like, what information does he have that we don't know? Yeah, Blue, you said no idea what he knows, though. He does seem to know something, huh? Hi, Nina. Well, I am gonna get started. We are on page 115 for chapter 157, which is called Zhangxiong. When Lu Yizhe left Zizhou the following day, Shen Zichuan sent Fei Sheng to accompany her entourage with the embroidered uniform guard. His instructions were to escort her all the way into Qidong's territory. Outstanding official business from the day before had to be discussed, so everyone settled back into their customary seats in the study with the windows open. If I may, this is the new document for the Vice Commander's perusal. Zhou Gui placed the papers on the table. We initially planned to keep a separate register of undocumented migrants and increase the severity of punishments, but during our discussion with Yuan Zhuo this morning, he proposed we not govern them separately from registered citizens. Once you post the notice, the issue of household registration will resolve itself. Yao Wenyu coughed, then continued. It won't do to segregate them at that point. It'll only create unhappiness among the newly registered commoners. Besides, how will the Yamen differentiate between old and new citizens when they carry out their duties? After reading through, Shen Zichuan nodded his agreement. If anyone tries to take advantage of the situation for their own gain, It'll be a disaster waiting to happen. Once this matter is settled, the only issue left for us to handle before the end of the year is the survey of fields. The current land records were all tabulated during the reign of Yongyi. They're long outdated. Hi, Henry. Blue, you said, why am I immediately filled with maternal instincts whenever I see Yao and you? Yeah, I agree. And, I mean, shocking no one, he's very smart, and he's very useful for these kinds of political things. Tizhou has been reclaiming areas of wasteland around us for 3 years in a row, Zhou Gui explained. The acreage of land has seen a significant increase. We should have resurveyed last year, but we didn't have the manpower. And with Lei Chongming bearing down on us, it was delayed until now. He made some quick calculations. You're right. This task must be completed before the end of the year. If we attempt it once there's snow on the ground, errors are bound to arise. Tizhou now had plenty of yeomen, runners, and constables, but capable clerks were few and far between. Zhou Gui's advisors were mainly charged with deliberating official business and not responsible for the transcription of documents, let alone going out to survey the fields. The prefectural yeoman was short-staffed, and so was Shen Zichuan. After newcomers register their households, screen them on the spot, Shen Zichuan declared. As long as they're literate, note their name down for future use. It doesn't matter if they're Tizhou locals or transplants from Dancheng. At this point, he looked around at the advisors. If anyone has a criminal history, we won't know unless they declare it, so we must be prudent during the vetting process. Some may also see this process as an opportunity. It's inevitable that there will be a few who attempt to curry favor with those making the decisions. I trust you gentlemen are all men of integrity, who can distinguish between the crafty and the virtuous and do the right thing. Seeing as he'd laid it out so plainly, no one missed his point. The advisors who'd been settled smoking their pipes now rose from their seats. A few looked embarrassed, no longer daring to treat this lightly. These advisors were all Zhou Gui's honored guests, with the freedom to enter and exit the manor as they pleased. Most were referred to as Mr., with their daily needs provided by for Zhou Gui. There were only 2 ways that they could earn some spare cash. The first was by providing literary services or selling calligraphy and ink paintings. The second was by attending banquets hosted by the local gentry and elders, whereupon they would receive monetary rewards for the honor of their presence. Now that migrants were flooding into Tizhou, these advisors had been put in charge of household registration and screening potential clerks. No doubt some of these migrants would be thinking of sneaking them bribes in hopes of preferential treatment. Gao Zhongxiong was one of many unlucky people caught in this mess. Okay, interesting. That's who the chapter is named for. The scholar's path had been a tumultuous one. He'd left his home in Yuzhou to enter the Imperial College, where he'd bragged that he and Shi Huilian hailed from the same hometown. As he had a bit of talent in learning, he had become a leading figure among the students in Chudu, and had even written essays in an attempt to challenge Yao Wenyu. Last year, when Shi Hongxuan had goaded the students of the Imperial College to protest over the matter of Shen Zichuan's release from the Temple of Guilt, Gao Zhongxiong had been the one kneeling at the very front, loudly condemning Pan Rugui and Jilei as traitors to the nation. Afterward, he had been taken into the imperial prison, his future as a scholar destroyed. In a fit of anger, he joined Han Jin's camp as his advisor. It was his suggestion that had sent Han Jin straight into the imperial army's jaws. Han Jin had ended up captured and imprisoned in Tizhou, where he remained to this day, waiting for rescue. Oh, Saikin, you're here. Yeah, you did make it fast. Fearing Han Sheng would blame him for his brother's fate, Gao Zhongxiong didn't dare to return to Chudu. Instead, he sought a favor from his maternal uncle in Dancheng and stayed as Pan Yi's advisor. At first, Pan Yi had planned to entrust him with heavy responsibilities. But many of the strategies Gao Zhongxiong put forth were impractical ideas that only sounded good on paper. Pan Yi gradually gave him the cold shoulder. Bullied and humiliated by the servants of the Pan Manor, Gao Zhongxiong could do nothing but return to his uncle's house. But when it rained, it poured. His uncle fell to his death one night after drinking. As Gao Zhongxiong was a scholar whose arms were too weak for manual labor, his aunt disdained him for being useless and sought an excuse to send him back to Yuzhou. Gao Zhongxiong was too ashamed to return home to face his family and friends. He considered selling calligraphy and paintings to rent a few acres of modest farmland, where he would make like the sages of old and lead a simple, virtuous life, far from the struggles of wealth and power. But to his great dismay, after saving enough money to rent the field, he only worked the land a handful of times before it was occupied by a local despot from the Fei clan. Gao Zhongxiong marched to the Yemen to lodge a complaint, but that very same night, he was cornered in an alley and beaten to a pulp. Even his house was robbed. Gao Zhongxiong was again driven out into the streets without a penny to his name. He finally wanted to return to Yuzhou, but had no coin for passage. Left with no choice, he fled Dancheng with the other migrants and came to Cizhou, hoping to try his luck. Old Man Shu. Gao Zhongxiong stood nervously outside the door of the prefectural Yemen. When he saw the man emerging, he quickly called out, "Any news?" He'd been a distinguished figure back in Shudu, yet now he had to humble himself when speaking to others. He wanted to ingratiate himself, but his pride kept him from going too far. So he simply stood rooted to the spot, looking distinctly uncomfortable. The Yemen runner, surnamed Shu, brandished his broad wooden staff and shooed Gao Zhongxiong off to the side. Only when they were out of sight of the door did he hiss at Gao Zhongxiong. "What are you doing here?" Gao Zhongxiong was so humiliated at this admonishment that, for a moment, he couldn't lift his head. Gripping his sleeves, he forced a smile and finally managed to look up. "I passed by the wine shop earlier and brought some over for you to quench your thirst. Here, sir, have some." He presented the wine gourd with both hands, continuing only when he saw the other man's expression had softened slightly. "I've been in Cizhou a few days. About the matter I spoke of last time." "The matter you spoke of?" Runner Shu drank the wine, wiped his mouth, and flatly lied. "What matter is that?" "The matter of getting a job in the Yemen." Gao Zhongxiong didn't raise his hand to wipe the man's spittle off his cheek. "Please do me a favor and pass a message on to the advisors. Just say I was formerly a student in Chudu who has received critique from the Chief Surveillance Bureau's Oh, that. That can be easily arranged." Runner Shu moved in closer. "Bring me 3 taels of silver, and I'll buy a few packs of tobacco for the gentleman. After that, you'll get in for sure." Gao Zhongxiong was taken aback, his expression a mixture of hope and sorrow. "But I've already given it all to you. I have no more money." The old man's expression instantly turned cold. "How can you do anything without money? Do you think the advisors are suckers? They can recognize gold and silver as well as anyone. If I hadn't taken pity on you and helped you out, what could you do with this piddly amount of silver? It's far from enough." Gao Zhongxiong grasped the man's arm. "I've already given you 7 taels of silver. You must have some news." "You want to bribe your way in, but you can't bear to part with your money." Runner Shu threw the wine gourd back at Gao Zhongxiong and stretched his neck out to spit on him, his words contemptuous. "You'd have to loosen that money belt just to piss or shit around here." This wily old Yemen runner had swindled Gao Zhongxiong of all his money. After hanging around with the other migrants all day, the scholar was as filthy as any beggar. As he stared at Runner Shu's wrinkly old mug, He again recalled the humiliation he'd suffered in Dancheng. Unable to contain himself, he charged toward the man and slapped him. "If you are not going to help me, give me back my money." Runner Shu never imagined Gao Zhongxiong would have the nerve to strike him. He jabbed a finger at Gao Zhongxiong's nose. "You, a dirty cheapskate like you dares to hit me?" He swung his staff at Gao Zhongxiong's waist, kicked him to the ground, and struck him viciously. Gao Zhongxiong was a scholar, not a fighter, and had been starving for days. He felt a stab of intense pain. The staff must have cracked his ribs. Rolling on the ground, he covered his head as he attempted to dodge the blows, crying so hard he could scarcely breathe. Even so, he continued to shout, "Have you no conscience? You cheated me at my very last coins. Have you no conscience?" They'd begun to draw the eyes of passerby. Runner Shu didn't dare make too big a scene, lest his colleagues in the Yemen come to investigate. He tossed his staff aside and straddled Gao Zhongxiong on the ground, then gripped his jaw and shoved his handkerchief into his mouth to gag him. Gao Zhongxiong howled as he struggled, so the old man slapped him until Gao Zhongxiong's ears were ringing and his vision blurred. Blood seeped from the corners of his mouth. "I'm on official business here," Runner Shu called to the growing crowd. "This son of a bitch is a thief from Dancheng. I already caught him once. To think he has the balls to come and seek revenge." A groan escaped Gao Zhongxiong as Runner Shu grasped his collar and dragged him into the Yemen compound. His cheek scraped the ground, bloodied by the rough gravel. He reached his hand out toward the spectators in a silent plea for help. Runner Shu kicked Gao Zhongxiong a few more times in the ribs and stomach for good measure. Most Yemen runners were adept at detaining people for questioning. Teaching a frail scholar like Gao Zhongxiong a lesson was child's play. If he brought Gao Zhongxiong in and kept him gagged while he processed him with a thievery charge, he could throw him in jail. All he had to do then was to drop a word to a jailer he was on good terms with, and Gao Zhongxiong would get what he had coming. Whether or not he survived past the 8th month would all depend on Runner Shu's mood. As Gao Zhongxiong was being dragged across the dirt, Zhou Gui was returning with Shen Zichuan from the fields outside the city. The carriage had been obstructed on one of the city roads, yet another instance of the migrants causing trouble, Zhou Gui presumed. Shen Zichuan didn't say a word. It was Zhou Gui who hastily stepped off his own carriage, lifting the hem of his robe as he pushed through the crowd. "What's all this? Who's kicking up such a fuss outside the Yemen?" "Your Excellency," Runner Shu replied, "I've caught a thief. He not only refuses to submit, he even struck me." Anxious and weary from the disorder in the city these past few days, Zhou Gui scowled. "Be that as it may, this is no way to handle it. What are you doing beating people in the streets? It's disgraceful." He glanced down at Gao Zhongxiong, intending to educate him next on the morals of a good citizen. But he remembered they were still in the way of Shen Zichuan's carriage, which oughtn't be delayed. "Hurry then. Bring him in. See that he gets a proper trial once he's cleaned up." Upon hearing this, Gao Zhongxiong thrashed with all his might, attempting to spit out the handkerchief in his mouth. Within the carriage, Yao Wenyu was discussing the clerk interviews they'd conducted over the past few days with Shen Zichuan. The carriage showed no signs of moving anytime soon. Chao Tianya stepped over and lifted a corner of the curtain to report. "Master, they're still arguing. Let's take a detour." Shen Zichuan pushed the curtain higher with his fan. "What's the matter?" "They're saying it's a thief. The Yemen runner arrested him on the street." Chao Tianya ducked his head and shuffled out of the way so Shen Zichuan could see. "I didn't spot any calluses on his hands. He seems to be a scholar." Yao Wenyu, who rarely enjoyed noisy places these days, followed their gazes. The street was swarming with people. He could see nothing at all. "Let's go around. Shen Zichuan let the curtain fall. Head straight back to the Zhou Manor. There are still people waiting in the study. We should discuss the matter of the trade market before nightfall. Chao Tianya ordered the carriage driver to turn around. As the wheels began to spin, they heard a heartbreaking wail. You people are trying to kill me. You're killing me. What kind of Yemen is this? Merciful heavens, must you reduce Gao Zhongxiong to such desperate straits? Yao Wenyu lifted the curtain again and said to Chao Tianya, Go stop him. That's Gao Zhongxiong, someone who'd received critique on his essays from Chen Yu himself. He looked toward Shen Zichuan. He's the one who led 3,000 students from the Imperial College to denounce Panrugui that rainy night. Vice Commander, this is someone we can use. That's the end of the chapter. Oh, yeah, Psyching, it's not like a super big deal, but, like, I think we're just generally very spoiler averse in here. But the only thing would have been to not hint to someone, like, if Zhongxiong was, like, going to survive or not, because I was kind of reading that chapter, like, I don't know if this guy is gonna live. But at the same time, the chapter is called Zhongxiong, so it's like, well, maybe he's important. Does that mean he's gonna be reoccurring or not? You know, but yeah. Also, yeah, Henry, you forgot how tiny the chapters are in this novel. They really are. And what clicked for me was realizing what chapter we stopped at in case file, like the chapter number, and then going, like, we're getting into book 5 of this book, and we're, like, way further along in the chapter numbers. And then I was like, oh yeah, some of them are really tiny, because I kind of like it, though. It's kind of like, Tong Jiuqing. It's like she picks, like, every chapter, for the most part, is very specifically focused on a certain theme or a certain person or a certain topic, and they're so short, but it's like, it makes sense. I feel like they're contained very well. Oh, but yeah, Seikin, you said this is the second time Gao Zhongxiong showed up. The thing is, I was thinking in my head the whole time, I was like, I feel like I'm supposed to know who this is already. And I had a vague recollection of the name, but I really could not remember, like, when we last saw him. But that's par for the course with the series, because there are, like, so many characters. So we are on page 125, which is chapter 158, Broken Jade. Broken Jade. That's an interesting chapter title. Clerks were not to be confused with government officials. They were at the bottom of the hierarchy, with no rank. But they could write and count, and were often more proficient in their knowledge of local law than the esteemed officials who sat high in their seats. As a result, too many clerks were adept at disposing of the evidence of their own fraud, oppression, and extortion of the commoners. Nor was it unusual, in places far away from the watchful eyes of the central administration, for those in such positions to cover for one another. When Lo Mu had first arrived in Chazhou hoping to clean house, there had been plenty of things he didn't manage to tackle, in part thanks to the impediment of the local clerks. The management of his subordinates in the local administration didn't merely affect the head official's political record. Sometimes, these same people could also become obstacles to the implementation of his policies. The imperial court had assigned a provincial surveillance commissioner to Zhongbo shortly after its fall, but by then, Dunzhou could no longer hold the other 5 prefectures in check. In recent years, the local administrators within the 6 prefectures, including the clerks, had become increasingly corrupt. Gao Zhongxiang was taken to a physician, while Zhou Gui paced in the study. The advisor sat silent in the partitioned area, waiting for Shen Zichuan to speak. This incident affected not only the screening of clerks, but whether the prefectural yeoman would be replacing its current staff. When Zhou Gui spoke, his tone was grave. We were just discussing this yesterday, and already things have gone awry. Old Man Shu alone has accepted bribes of over a dozen silver taels. There are so many men in the Yemen. If others are taking similar bribes, how many of the clerks we employ as a result of this screening will be genuinely useful? Yao Wenyu took a sip of tea, put the lid back on his cup, and said nothing. Anyone with the most basic powers of discernment could see this case implicated Zhou Gui's advisors. Old Man Shu was merely a member of the Yemen's staff, yet he dared use the screenings as an opportunity for brazen bribe-taking. Without a contact behind the scenes, his schemes would have been impossible. Yao Wenyu was Shen Zichuan's advisor. If he spoke up and asked that the offenders be dealt with severely, he would be suspected of trying to supplant Zhou Gui's people. In all recent discussions, he had been seated securely by Shen Zichuan's side as his counselor, but he was a newcomer, and could not compare to the others in seniority. The reputation of unpolished jade, Yuan Zhuo, was known far and wide. Oh, so maybe the chapter is Broken Jade because he's been broken. Others had treated him as an immortal when he was beyond their reach, but now that he had fallen, he was a live target. Some jockeying among peers was to be expected, but if this led to friction between Shen Zichuan and Zhou Gui, it would be to the detriment of all Zizhou. Every injustice has its perpetrator, and every debt its debtor. Shen Zichuan tossed his fan in his hand, his expression unreadable. Deal with the offender according to standard procedures. The screening process is a significant undertaking. There is plenty at stake. We cannot risk harming any of the diligent and hardworking gentlemen here out of paranoia. The advisors on the other side of the partition made not a sound, although a few inwardly sighed in relief. As long as Shen Zichuan lived in Suzhou, he relied on Zhou Gui's power and influence. Of course, he would handle this matter with a soft touch. Corruption within the prefectural administration could and should be rooted out. But now was not a good time. If they cracked down and followed the trail of evidence, they might conceivably implicate over half the staff in Suzhou's prefectural Yemen. How would they get any work done if the office was empty? But now Zhou Gui was the reluctant one. Vice Commander, it is precisely because it's significant that it must be investigated. We can't let these people destroy the ethos of the prefectural Yemen. If more people imitate this behavior in the future, the commoners will be the ones to suffer. Naturally, it must be investigated. What I meant was that we should proceed by the book. Shen Zichuan called for more tea, then continued. Old Man Shu has been taken into custody. If your excellency has misgivings, then by all means, send someone you trust to sit in and transcribe his interrogation. With the embroidered uniform guard conducting the trial, we will have results by tonight. Baseless accusations cannot be trusted, but conclusive evidence cannot be disregarded. Whosoever violated the regulations of the Yemen will have to bear the consequences of their actions. The newly transcribed penal laws were just posted. This incident has come at the perfect time. Your Excellency can hold the trial before the citizens of Zizhou. The more muddied the waters, the more important it is to sift until they're clear. But once the case concludes, we must not take rumors for truth and jump to conclusions. The Yemen must not implicate the innocent. This trial must be undertaken as a warning, Zhou Gui said. Shen Zichuan is so opportunistic, and I say that in a loving way. Just so, Shen Zichuan concurred. Minor offenders shall be dismissed from their position, and serious offenders shall be exiled to barren lands. If public sentiment runs high against the guilty parties, an on-the-spot execution can also deliver immense satisfaction. A crash rang out from the other side of the partition, and the stunned gasps of the advisors filled the air. "What happened?" Zhou Gui cried. "Your Excellency, someone fainted." Several voices replied at once. These advisors had assumed Shen Zichuan meant to punish only Old Man Shu and show mercy to the rest of them. They hadn't expected he wanted to make a public example of them. How could an old lout from the countryside like Old Man Shu withstand the interrogation of the embroidered uniform guard? When Shen Zichuan had said they mustn't implicate the innocent, he meant not pursuing the matter further than this. But not a single person involved in Old Man Shu's bribery racket was going to get away with it. As they sat and listened, their horror grew. When Shen Zichuan uttered the words "on-the-spot execution," one of them passed out cold. It was briefly pandemonium in the study. Elsewhere, Gao Zhongxiong was grimacing in pain under the hands of the physician. After his wounds were tended and his meal was ready, he changed into a clean set of clothes with the help of the maidservants. He had always been one to place great value on the health and wellness back in Shudu. Although he was starving, he didn't gobble down his meal. When he finished eating, the maidservants led Gao Zhongxiong to the courtyard. He didn't dare look around on the way. He knew Shen Zichuan was currently residing in Suzhou, and was thus deeply apprehensive. As a man who had given Han Jin counsel on the pursuit and capture of Xiao Qie, coming to Suzhou at all had been a risky move. Gao Zhongxiong stepped into the courtyard and saw that the orange jasmine behind the wooden railing of the veranda had all withered. No one had swept away the blanket of white petals, presumably at the instructions of the master of the house, that its natural fragrance might linger in the air. The soft green moss and fine gravel along the edge of the pond bridge resembled a plush new mattress. The sight distracted him as he ascended the steps, and in his moment of inattention he nearly slipped. He awkwardly recovered and, sweating profusely, bowed to the maidservants, snickering behind their hands. Wind chimes dangled beneath the eaves. Ding Tao waited for Gao Zhongxiong to approach before he lifted the curtains and led him inside. Not knowing Ding Tao's identity, Gao Zhongxiong didn't dare offend him. He lifted the hem of his own robe, intending to stride in, only to realize there was no elevated threshold at the door of this room. The interior of the hall was bright and spacious, bare of any valuable ornaments. Back in Shudu, Gao Zhongxiong had often heard that Shen Zichuan kept company with the likes of Shi Hongxuan. He was said to be fond of extravagance, carrying a small ivory fan at all times. Gao Zhongxiong guessed that perhaps the owner of this manor was Zhou Gui. He took his seat, sitting upright and very still, his buttocks barely touching the edge of the chair, as he watched for signs of movement in the courtyard. A short moment later, he heard the sound of wheels outside. Ding Tao, who had been under the eaves, stepped out to greet someone. "Young master." The curtain lifted, and Gao Zhongxiong rose to his feet. Yet the first one to enter was neither Shen Zichuan nor Zhou Gui, but a tall and wild-looking bodyguard. The guard didn't look at Gao Zhongxiong. Instead, he leaned over to take hold of a wheelchair and pushed in a green-robed young man with an overcoat draped over his shoulders. Gao Zhongxiong had already bent his knees to kneel, but when he got a clear look at the wheelchair's occupant, he couldn't help but gape. He took a step back, eyes wide. "Yao, Yuan Zhuo." The exclamation put a frown on Shen Zichuan's face. He entered a step behind the wheelchair and removed his overcoat, heading straight for the seat of honor. I think, oh yeah, Henry, you said, remember when he was tacky and Xiao Qie styled it out of him? Right, because he used to carry an ivory fan, and then Xiao Qie was like, "This is gaudy." Chao Tianya pushed Yao Wenyu to the front, and the maid servants came forward to serve tea. Yao Wenyu balanced the cup in his hands and said with his usual mild expression, "It's been a long time." I didn't expect Shen Wei to have come to Suzhou, too. Wait, what? By the way, that's written Shen Wei, like one word, like one name. So it's not Shen Wei. It's Shen Wei, like no space. So maybe it's his... Maybe, I don't know if it's like Zhongxiong's like other name. I forget what they're called here. I don't think it's like courtesy names, or maybe it is, but whatever it is, I don't know. Like, I'm just gonna keep reading and see if they explain that. Inexplicably, Gao Zhongxiong broke out in a cold sweat. He dabbed at his brow and hummed in acknowledgement. No longer daring to meet Yao Wenyu's eyes, he hastily paid his respects to Shen Zichuan. Your Excellency. Shen Zichuan found this man's expression peculiar. After settling himself, he said, "There's no need to be so formal. Take a seat." But how would Gao Zhongxiong possibly dare? Since Shen Wei knows the vice commander, there's no need for me to waste time on introductions. Upon seeing Gao Zhongxiong's pallor, Yao Wenyu paused for a moment, then softened his tone. "Shen Wei, don't be afraid. I'm very much still alive." Gao Zhongxiong absently repeated, "Yes." "You enjoy. What makes you say that?" Shen Zichuan asked. "I had a chance encounter with Shen Wei and Dancheng," Yao Wenyu explained succinctly. "The poison and my injuries acted up simultaneously then and gave him quite a scare." But if the nervousness with which Gao Zhongxiong fidgeted was any indication, it had been more than a chance encounter. After Yao Wenyu's legs were broken and he left the capital, he traveled to Dancheng, where he remained under the care of Pan Yi and Commandery Princess Zhao Yue. He must have encountered the poison that had so destroyed his health in Dancheng. But until now, he had never told anyone the story. Oh, right, I didn't even think about that, because the people who attacked him didn't poison him. So somebody else poisoned him? Gao Zhongxiong, however, knew all about it. "I left Dancheng in a hurry. Are the Commandant and the Commandery Princess well?" Yao Wenyu asked. At Yao Wenyu's gentle tone, Gao Zhongxiong gradually relaxed enough to answer smoothly, though he kept his head turned, too afraid to look at Yao Wenyu. "Yes, they're both fine." Shen Zichuan sensed a strange undercurrent beneath this exchange. The maidservants had retreated. Ding Tao was idly striking the wind chimes under the eaves. They clinked noisily, as if buffeted by a gale. Chao Tianya stuck his head out to chase Ding Tao off, and only then did it finally fall quiet on the other side of the bamboo blinds. Yeah, Blue, you said one more string to the mirror board. Okay, the term is courtesy name. I wasn't sure if courtesy name was, like, always the terminology in every, you know, era, I guess, in China, or if there were, like, different terms at different times for different settings or whatever. So I didn't know. That's good to know. Where was I? There was no perceptible shift in Yao Wenyu's mood after hearing this news. He set aside his teacup and broke the silence. When I arrived in Dancheng, the Commandery Princess looked after me for a time. But she is, after all, a married woman. It would be improper for her to become too involved. The Commandant thus sought out his younger brother of common birth, Pan Yuan, who is still living at home. Pan Yuan was an idler who spent his days loafing around. Though he was fond of gambling, he was not a son of lawful birth and had only a small allowance. He relied on Pan Yi and his wife to repay the enormous debt he owed. Pan Yi placed Yao Wenyu in Pan Yuan's care. hoping his younger brother might be inspired to emulate the virtuous Yuan Zhuo and thus better himself. He remembered Pan Yuan had been quite dedicated to taking care of their elderly father in the past, and could be considered a filial son. And indeed, Pan Yuan was attentive enough at first. Thanks to Commandery Princess Zhao Yue's exhortations, he didn't dare be negligent in his care of Yao Wenyu. And he didn't have to do anything personally. His only job was to watch the physicians and attendants to ensure they were timely with the meals and medicine and not loafing on the job. But over time, Pan Yuan grew bored and impatient, and started to find excuses to venture out to gamble. Pan Lin used a prisoner's body as a decoy, but this didn't dispel Xue Xiuzhuo's suspicions, Yao Wenyu explained. The commandery princess left in such a hurry, and it was inevitable that there were spies in her entourage. Later, the gambling den came hounding Pan Yuan for payment, and Pan Yuan went into hiding. He was too afraid to tell his family, so he often poured his woes out to me. Penniless as I am, however, I was in no position to help, even if I wanted to. Gao Zhongxiong nodded. Pan Yuan sought me out as well around that time to borrow money. He said he'd been backed into a corner. He'd sold off the fields belonging to his branch of the family, but he still couldn't pay down his debt. I advised him to tell the commandant as soon as possible before more trouble came of it, but he refused. Yao Wenyu listened in silence. Not half a month later, Gao Zhongxiong continued, Pan Yuan suddenly came to me for a drink. He said his gambling debts had been fully paid. He'd met a generous benefactor who had extended a helping hand. Of course, I worried he'd been deceived by the gambling den, so I sounded him out about this benefactor. But he only said the man was a Longyou merchant from Chudu who'd asked him to run a small errand. Another half a month passed, yet Yao Wenyu's injuries did not heal. Instead, his health had deteriorated further. Commandery Princess Zhao Yue questioned all the physicians, but Yao Wenyu's condition showed no improvement. At the same time, Pan Lin met with censure in Chudu, and Pan Yi was impeached along with him. The issue turned out to be the Pan clan's fields in Dancheng. Pan Xiangjie didn't dare speak up for his sons, terrified of drawing more ire down on the family. But even the Pan clan's repeated concessions didn't stop the storm from blowing their way. The imperial censors got so heated, they demanded Pan Lin be suspended pending trial. The Pan clan was by no means innocent, but those were debts born of Pan Xiangjie's greed. It was obvious to Pan Lin that he was bearing the brunt of it because he was harboring Yao Wenyu. Pan Lin was incensed at the injustice, and adamant on fighting Xue Xiuzhuo to the bitter end. It didn't take long for Pan Xiangjie to learn the inside story. Fearing the entire clan would be implicated, he sent a letter to Pan Yi and Dancheng overnight. In it, he demanded that Pan Yi send Yao Wenyu back to Chudu as soon as possible. Pan Yi refused. His defiance sent Pan Xiangjie into such a rage that he became bedridden from illness. While Pan Yi was caught in this dilemma, Commandery Princess Zhao Yue grew increasingly suspicious about Yao Wenyu's worsening condition. She bypassed the front hall and instructed her personal maid to call a physician from outside the manor to take a look. Yao Wenyu had no wish to get into the details. After a moment of silence, he simply said, "The Commandery Princess was worried Chudu would use the pretext of inspecting the fields to come and capture me. She had initially wanted to send me to convalesce at a country manor that came as part of her dowry, but her suspicions with regard to the medicine meant she could no longer trust the servants of the Pan Manor. She prepared travel expenses and entrusted someone with the task of smuggling me to Jincheng, where my late teacher's old friends still reside. But misfortune never came singly. His entourage saw that Yao Wenyu was not only seriously ill, but lacked the use of both legs. Almost as soon as they left the city, they forgot every word of the Commandery Princess's instructions, and ran away with both the travel expenses and carriage under cover of night. Yao Wenyu had been abandoned in the dark. All that remained, other than the donkey, was the kitten in his sleeve. He was used to sleeping in the wilderness with the earth as his pillow when he wandered the mountains and plains, but his experience now was poles apart. For the first time in his 24 years of life, he confronted his own uselessness. Stripped of his reputation, he was nobody. Unpolished jade Yuanzhuo. At that moment, Yao Wenyu loathed that name to the core. It was a humiliation carved deep into his bones. Lying in the wilderness, Yao Wenyu broke down and cried inconsolably. For his teacher, and for himself. He had refused to see anyone when he was in Dancheng, merely lying on that bed, shrouded in dimness from dawn till dusk. The pain was in his legs, but his self-worth was the thing that had shattered. He was forced to acknowledge that he could no longer take care of himself. His carefree spirit had turned to smoke and ash, scattered in the wind. This realization haunted his dreams each night he slept, and dogged his days each morning he woke. He was broken through and through, yet he still wanted to live. That's the end of the chapter. That was a doozy. Well, it's not quite 4, and we're through 3 out of 6 chapters for the day. And that was, emotionally taxing, that last part. I'm just like, yeah, when you enjoy, you poor man. I love him. He's such a great character. I'm so glad he's, like, a part of the team now. Oh, the Chao Tianya parallels, yeah. There's so many parallels. So I'm gonna take... You said, Henry, you said wump so bad, he brings out the courtesy name. I know, it's just... Also, his courtesy name is fun to say. Yuanzhuo is fun to say, for sure. So yeah, I'm gonna take about a 10-minute break. And when we come back, we will be on chapter 159, which is called Nameless. So that's fun. Yes, Henry, you said you need him and Shen Zichuan to be friends in times of peace. Absolutely. Me too. Right, I will be right back. Hello, I am back. Oh, Nina, thank you for the reminder to everybody. It does help if y'all like the stream. So, I'm still thinking about that guy's courtesy name being Shenwei and how weird that is. And it's like, okay, well, it's just, if you were reading it in Chinese, it would just be like a different set of characters probably, and maybe it like doesn't seem that weird, but I'm like, that was weird to read. Okay. We are on page 137 for chapter 159, Nameless. Something had gone awry with Yao Wenyu's medicine. Though the physicians from the Pond Manor couldn't figure out what was wrong, whatever it was could no doubt be laid at the feet of Pan Yuan. After all, he had been the one tasked with looking after Yao Wenyu. The commandery princess attempted to track down the Longyo merchant who had paid off Pan Yuan's debts, but the man had disappeared without a trace. And not long after Yao Wenyu left, Pan Yuan fell off his horse and died. With this, the trail leading to whomever had instigated him to poison Yao Wenyu went cold. Still, Pan Lin was certain Xue Xiuzhuo was behind it. Their relationship in Chudu continued to deteriorate. Gao Zhongxiong sensed the creeping tension in the room. He too had been on friendly terms with Pan Yuan, and he felt as though he was sitting on pins and needles, waiting for Yao Wenyu to blame him by association. When the silence became too much for him to bear, he blurted, "I was acquainted with Pan Yuan, but we don't share the same ideals. Any conversation we had over wine was merely a polite formality." He was unskilled at flattery and stumbled over his words. On the contrary, I greatly admire Yuan Zhuo's talent. Perhaps you remember that gathering in Chaodong Tavern during the reign of Xiande. Yuan Zhuo's talent and bearing were dazzling then, truly a sight to behold. Yao Wenyu waited for Gao Zhongxiong to trail off before calmly replying, "The past is but a dream. We needn't mention it here. It's fate that I've encountered you again in Suzhou. I've found a good master here, But may I ask what plans you have for the future? Gao Zhongxiong stole a glance at Shen Zichuan. What plans could I have? Look at me. His mouth twisted in a bitter smile. I've been reduced to a laughingstock. I persevered in my studies for so many years, but in the end, it's all come to nothing. Beneath his sleeves, Shen Zichuan's fingers tightened around his folding fan. The room felt chilly. It was time to get someone to prepare a hand warmer. He pulled his wandering mind back to the present, his jade earrings swaying slightly as he spoke politely to Gao Zhongxiong. The political climate is unstable, and great men across the land are stepping out from the crowd to make a name for themselves. Since Mr. Shenwei has come so far to Zizhou, why not reside in my manor for now and take your time to decide? Gao Zhongxiong couldn't help but feel greatly touched to hear Shen Zichuan address him as Mr. Shenwei. He'd been through untold hardship on his journey, and the masters he had encountered and served had not been good ones. He stood and bowed deeply to Shen Zichuan, his expressions of thanks even more awkward and inarticulate than his praise of Yao Wenyu had been. Shen Zichuan spoke a few more comforting words, and Gao Zhongxiong finally withdrew almost an hour later. Yao Wenyu watched the bamboo blinds falling back into place. He waited until Gao Zhongxiong was out of earshot before asking, "Can the vice commander see no use for this man?" Even if Shen Zichuan truly thought so, he couldn't say it outright. For you to have given him such a strong recommendation, there must be something extraordinary about him. I think so, Yao Wenyu said. Gao Zhongxiong's courtesy name is Shenwei, divinely powerful. In the Imperial College, he was known as the Sharpened Pen. Back then, when Shi Hongshuan was stirring up unrest in Chudu by inciting the Imperial College, he chose Gao Zhongxiong precisely because of his eloquence. Gao Zhongxiong entered the capital as a student in the 4th year of Xiande. It was just after the fall of Zhongbo, when the 6 prefectures had become a scene of devastation. The lamentation of Chasha he wrote under the influence of wine sent the students falling over themselves to transcribe private copies for distribution. When the essay made its way into Tsen Yu's hands, he was so moved he shed tears by candlelight. Shen Zichuan sipped his tea. I see. The students' demonstration back then, facilitated by Shi Hongshuan, had in fact been instigated by Shen Zichuan himself. When Gao Zhongxiong had led the Imperial College in demanding answers for Shen Zichuan's release from the Temple of Guilt, it had been Pan Rugui and Ji Lei who arrived to quell the disturbance. The students had redirected their anger at these two, turning the entire farce into a dispute between the Imperial College and Pan Rugui's faction. Ji Lei and the rest had been caught off guard and subsequently lost the opportunity to land a decisive blow on Shen Zichuan as he entered the embroidered uniform guard. No one knew better than Shen Zichuan how that fiasco had begun. It was the same for the Imperial College riots Xue Xiuzhuo had later instigated. Both he and Shen Zichuan had deliberately manipulated public sentiment before herding the students in a desired direction. To accomplish such a feat, compelling rhetoric, words that had the power to move men, were indispensable. Yao Wenyu's meaning was clear. Gao Zhongxiong possessed such a power. His writing could sway hearts and minds, and a talent like this was exactly what Shen Zichuan now needed. Your trip to Chazhou made the vice commander a household name in Zhongbo. But as long as you bear the stain of Shen Wei's name, you will be unable to lead the people openly, or convince others to follow you. Yeah, when you paused. Even if the full story of what happened in Zhongbo is made public, Shen Wei will likely never be absolved of blame. A tarnished reputation stole weight from one's words. This was a problem Shen Zichuan could not circumvent. When the self-crowned King Yi of Fanzhou was drafting up letters and pamphlets to vilify Cizhou, He had made reference to Zhongbo's fall numerous times. Shen Wei's cowardice was a fact. There was no way to refute it, even if Zhou Gui wanted to. Shen Zichuan was Shen Wei's 8th son of common birth. They were related by blood, and whether or not he had been an unfavored child did nothing to diminish public anger. Unlike Fei Sheng, who had merely a distant, common birth connection to the Fei clan, Shen Zichuan's ties to the Shen clan were undeniable, and a glib tongue wouldn't convince anyone otherwise. Moreover, although they now knew that the true cause of the tragedy in Zhongbo had been Hua Siqian and his faction's attempt to fill the void in the state treasury, all the evidence had been destroyed. Shen Wei had self-immolated, Hua Siqian had died in prison, and Wei Huaigu had swallowed poison, taking their secrets with them. There was not a single trace left to find of their collusion with the Biansha horsemen to sell Great Zhou's defensive maps. This was the dark cloud looming over Shen Zichuan's head. It was also his greatest stumbling block. How was it that he had risen so swiftly to power in Sizhou, yet faced such a scarcity of capable subordinates? The talents of the land refused to approach him. They'd rather follow heroes like King Yi, who had risen in rebellion from among the common folk, than throw in their lot with the traitor's son. The vice commander executed one of Sizhou's advisors today. Only by holding the trial publicly did you prevent your name from falling further into infamy. You've overseen the rise of Sizhou and the alliance with Chazhou. But if the vice commander wishes to advance a step further, you must drop the title of vice commander. Noting that Shen Zichuan's expression remained unchanged as he toyed with his folding fan, Yao Wenyu knew he had already considered this. He continued, Sizhou has long freed itself from Chudu's control. Using your old title makes it too easy to mistake who is the master and who the subordinates. Maintaining the address is no longer apt. By this point, the two had reached a tacit understanding. Shen Zichuan could be addressed as vice commander or even judge. Those were his titles in the embroidered uniform guard. But both had been rendered void the instant he left Chudu. He was now in Sizhou, and the prefect of Sizhou was Zhou Gui. Without a new title of his own, he would always be the guest, and Zhou Gui the host and master. The offending advisors could remain securely in place on the other side of the partition, despite what had happened at the prefectural Yemen, because they still treated Zhou Gui as the administrator of Sizhou. They didn't see themselves as subordinate to Shen Zichuan. There was still a line marking him as an outsider. Only Kongling had recognized the problem long ago. He had brought this very thing to Zhou Gui's attention before he set off for Chazhou, and had reminded Zhou Gui again before he left for Huaizhou. But Zhou Gui truly wasn't well acquainted with this kind of political maneuvering, and thus had been slow to react. Yes, I'm excited for the rebranding. I want to see this rebranding. Shen Zichuan couldn't proclaim himself king. At least, not yet. King Yi of Fanzhou had helpfully established himself first. Now, he became the prey standing right under Qidong's nose. Qi Juyin had had enough time to catch her breath and return to the board. Once she dealt with the Bianjun commandery, she would at last have the wherewithal to deploy troops to Zhongbo. And the first adversary she would confront would be these self-proclaimed commoner kings. There are benefits to being nameless nobodies. Shen Zichuan leaned back slightly. At least Qi Juyin has no justifiable reason to skirt the other 5 prefectures and come after Sizhou. Sizhou had no bandits or self-styled kings. The 8 great battalions were pursuing Xiao Qiye, who commanded the imperial army. At most, Shen Zichuan was a fugitive, and Sizhou could be accused of harboring him. Zhou Gui hadn't openly run up the rebel flag. He was still technically the prefect in this territory. If he turned a deaf ear to Chudu's orders, It could be explained away by the vast distance between Suzhou and the capital. On these grounds alone, Qi Juyin could not directly attack Suzhou. Conceivably, she could route her troops to the western side of Suzhou and claim she was suppressing bandits, then enter with the excuse of passing through to the other prefectures. But deploying her troops this way would be expensive, and it was unlikely Chudu could spare the money. The best option had always been for the 8 great battalions to deploy their own troops. They were garrisoned closer to Suzhou and could be supplied by Dancheng. If they used the excuse of tracking down the fugitive Shen Zichun, they could easily instigate a war with Suzhou. But Han Jin had been too impatient. Xiao Qia had routed his troops and beaten Han Jin silly. The 8 great battalions had cowered back. But such a delicate balance couldn't be maintained for long. The 8 great battalions were bound to rally for another attempt. Once the 3 factions in Chudu stabilized under a new emperor, the Ministry of War would appoint a new chief commander. Xiao Qia and Shen Zichun had accepted the Beiyuan hunting grounds from Zhou Gui in order to guard against this very situation. Once they took up residence, the Imperial Army with its 20,000 men would become a shield defending the western edge of Suzhou, purposely positioned to resist the 8 great battalions. Yet, at the same time, the moment the Imperial Army re-entered Suzhou's territory, Qi Juyin could justifiably march north and attack Suzhou to eliminate the rebel forces. I'm hoping that we go in the direction that Qi Juyin does not do that, and that she somehow finds a way to, like, support Shen Zichuan's side and Xiao Qia's side, like the Imperial Army. I don't know how that would work. That would be like a major defection, unless she kind of secretly does certain things under the table and just avoids attacking them. Like, I don't know how any of that would work, but I'm just like, please don't make her an enemy. Thus, Shen Zichuan was in no hurry to get rid of King Yi of Fangzhou. He was happy to let this man be the mountain between him and Qidong. Yet he couldn't allow King Yi to expand his territory unchecked either. Before, I advised the vice commander to take Fangzhou down swiftly, but the timing is no longer right. The tea in Yao Wenyu's cup had cooled. If the vice commander wants to keep King Yi in play, you must hack off the hand he is extending north. A few months ago, Shen Zichuan said, his eyes sharp, Tsa'an sent Lei Jingzhe back to Mount Luo with his reputation in tatters. Ever since he lost control of the bandits, it's been chaos on Mount Luo as the various factions turn against one another. If King Yi wishes to form an alliance with Mount Luo, Lei Jingzhe, who badly wants to return to power, certainly won't miss the opportunity. Something stirred in Yao Wenyu's eyes. The vice commander means to... Shen Zichuan snapped open his folding fan and partially covered his face. With a smile in his eyes, he said, I'd like to lend him a helping hand. The wind had picked up outside the window. It seemed it was about to rain again. There's a scene break, and I feel like I just dissociated through that couple of paragraphs, because I'm like, wait, who does Shen Zichuan want to help? He wants to lend a helping hand to... Lei Jingzhe in order to fight back against King Yi. Like, he's trying to sow discord between the two of them. I think I missed something there, but I know that Shen Zichuan is scheming. I know he's got ideas. Han Jin had gouged at the walls until his fingers were scraped bloody. He had been in the Tezhou prison close to 3 months, so emaciated he was barely recognizable. Even worse, he endured a constant stream of verbal abuse and insults from guards and fellow prisoners. At first, he couldn't take it and wept day in and day out. But as time passed, he gradually grew numb. Mealtime. Bucket in hand, the prison guard rapped on the cell doors one at a time with a wooden spoon and hollered, "It's mealtime." The guard was adept at this duty and swiftly dished out the broth and rice, filling the bowls to the brim without losing a drop. Upon hearing his voice, Han Jin hurried over to the cell door and reached for the bowl. But before his fingers so much as brushed it, another jailer passing by behind kicked the bowl over, spilling the contents over the ground. Han Jin was so hungry his stomach ached. He dropped to his knees and pinched at the rice on the ground with his fingers, desperately shoving it into his mouth. Grains of sand and dirt clung to the rice, and even a few tiny rocks, which made his teeth ache as he ground down on them. He pressed his head against the bars and reached into his mouth with the dirty hand to extract the stones. As he did, he saw a pair of legs stop outside the door. Han Jin cautiously glanced up through the bars. Gao Zhongxiong, who had only meant to come peek at his former master, had never expected to find Han Jin reduced to such a state. Han Jin was Han Cheng's younger brother, known as a free-spirited young master in Chudu. He had succeeded Shi Guan as the military commissioner of the 8th Great Battalion, and had even waded into the waters himself during the incident with the public ditches. At that time, he had respected Xiao Qie greatly. Gao Zhongxiong felt a lump in his throat. Several times, he made to speak, but words failed him. Han Jin looked blankly at Gao Zhongxiong, then pressed his face to the bars, and asked tearfully, "Is my elder brother here? Tell me, has my brother come?" Yeah, Blue, I hear you. Even if the guy objectively sucks, that is not fun to read. At all. So, am I to presume that this is a flashback of something happened earlier? Because that's what it seems like it would be, but I'm not 100% sure. But anyway, that is the end of the chapter. We are on page 146 for chapter 160, which is called Hearsay. Right, the public ditches were already a year ago? Like, what? Blue, you said, I believe this is the present. Yeah, because there wasn't really an indication of, like, this already happening. But I wasn't sure. Okay. Shocked, Gao Zhongxiong stepped backward until he bumped into the bars behind him. Han Jin couldn't even stand mosquito bites during military campaigns. How could he endure the dirty conditions of a prison? Scrambling on the ground for scraps like this went against his very nature. When he saw Gao Zhongxiong's expression, he burst out wailing, "You treacherous man! I'm in this state because of you." Oh yeah, they mentioned before the guy is still in prison. Does that make sense? Not daring to respond, Gao Zhongxiong stuck close to the opposite bars as he headed for the exit. Consumed with hatred, Han Jin launched into a torrent of curses. "You threw in your lot with that traitor Shen. Fucking shameless. A disloyal turncoat slave who panders to a traitor. Gao Zhongxiong, you're on your own now. Don't you dare run. Come back, you." Gao Zhongxiong cut a sorry figure indeed as he pushed the prison door open and fled that relentless, haunting voice. Outside, the chilly wind gnawed at his back. All scholars cherished their reputations. Who didn't wish to go down in history as an honorable man of letters, unsullied by politics? The words disloyal turncoat slave had dealt him such a blow he swayed on his feet. Tens of thousands of grievances crowded in his heart. With nowhere to vent, they congealed into a surge of nausea, so overwhelming, he grabbed at the wall and threw up. He vomited everything he had consumed that day, heaving until only acid was left. He leaned against the wall, gradually sliding to the ground. As he tipped his head up toward the vast sky, he thought of his family back in Yuzhou. He wiped his mouth with a handkerchief, but the tears streaming down his cheeks wouldn't stop. He wiped them with his sleeve instead. Gao Zhongxiong wrapped his arms around himself, curled up in a corner, and sobbed silently. What sort of person would be willing to give up his dignity and bow to power for a pittance? Not Gao Zhongxiong. But without this pittance, he would die. To find a way out for himself, he had cast aside the very last of his pride. Had anyone told him 5 years ago that he would bow obsequiously to Yemen's staff and beg for a clerical position in a small prefectural administration, he would have said he'd rather die. But now he'd done more than that. He had learned how to flatter others for the smallest of rewards. Some time later, Gao Zhongxiong got up, tidied himself, and edged along the wall as he made his way out onto the streets. As he approached the Yemen, he had the sense that the whispers he heard were directed at him, but he didn't feel a thing. It was just as Yao Wenyu had said. The past was a dream. He, too, had woken up. This one is Gao Zhongxiong, and my humble courtesy name is Shenwei. Gao Zhongxiong strode into the Yemen and bowed. It is on the personal recommendation of the vice commander that I've come to offer my writing skills for the Yemen's use. In the future, I shall be responsible for drafting up all the official proclamations and public notices required by the Yemen. And there's another scene break. The end of the 8th month came in a blink. Kong Ling and Yu Xiaozai returned from their trip to Huaizhou. The negotiations had gone smoothly. But one thing had stood out as odd. The attitude of the Luosha Pass commander had been most peculiar when they crossed Luosha Pass on the way back, far more cordial than the first time they passed through on the way to Huaizhou. That commandant from Luosha Pass was digging for information on our vice commander, Yu Xiaozai explained. He made several inquiries regarding the vice commander's marriage. He couldn't be trying to play matchmaker for the vice commander, could he? Thinking of Xiao Chia, Zhou Gui blurted, "How did you answer?" At first I wanted to say the vice commander was spoken for. Yu Xiaozai had grown much tanner on this trip. But Chung Feng advised me not to, so I simply said he was still unmarried. Perhaps Zhou Gui and Yu Xiaozai didn't understand, but Kong Ling was a discerning man. He had heard that the heir consort of Li Bei had visited Zizhou, and had paid special attention to Luosha Pass's attitude on their return journey. He had a good idea of the reason for the change. No doubt Li Bei had reached out to the commandant in advance. The only thing he didn't know was whether it was the prince or the heir seeking information on Shen Zichuan. Kong Ling picked up his teacup. The vice commander isn't married. It's better to state things as they are. Anything else provides fodder for gossip and may lead to misunderstandings. Zhou Gui was about to bring up all that had happened with the screening of the clerks when Xiao Tianya lifted the curtains. The men rose in unison. Vice Commander. It was raining today, and Shen Zichuan had walked the whole way over from his manor. Even with an umbrella, it was inevitable he would get wet. In contrast, Yao Wenyu was bundled securely in a cloak as he was pushed in. Yet the layers didn't conceal his unnatural thinness. Even in the wheelchair, he seemed insubstantial. Bringing up the rear was Gao Zhongxiong, dressed simply, with a pile of books in his arms and his shoulders partially wet. "Gentlemen, please take a seat." Shen Zichuan settled into his chair and dried his hands with his handkerchief. The long journey must have been hard on Mr. Chung Feng and Yo Jing. There's no hurry to return to duty so soon. You must take a few days' break. Kong Ling and Yu Xiaozai both gave their thanks. "Shenwei, do sit. There's no need for these formalities." Shen Zichuan waved Gao Zhongxiong toward a chair and said to Kong Ling, This is Shenwei, a new subordinate of mine who specializes in composition. He's presently gaining experience in the Yemen, but there are plenty of matters on which he will need Mr. Chungfeng's guidance. Kongling humbly turned the compliment aside and looked Gao Zhongxiong over. The erstwhile student had his hair up in a simple topknot today. As he spent all day moving about the Yemen, efficiency had taken precedence over style, and he no longer looked so much like a scholar. Gao Zhongxiong set down the books in his arms and bowed to Kongling in greeting. What a great honor. Mr. Chungfeng's reputation precedes him. Kongling rose and returned the greeting. Shen Zichuan waited until they resettled in their seats before speaking again. Things are going smoothly in both Huaizhou and Chazhou. Everyone can look forward to a good year. The new clerks have been sent off to survey the fields. To ensure the accuracy of their measurements, their first survey will be followed by 2 more checks. This work will likely take until the end of the year, but we should finish the survey before the snow. The household registration is complete as well, and Tizhou's autumn harvest has been transferred into the granaries. Once snow falls, we should begin discussing the allocation of farmlands. Yao Wenyu took this as his cue to speak. In the past, the land taxes and levies in Chudu were all paid in kind. After the grain was collected and put into storage, its value was carefully calculated. The labor costs of the transport office to take the grain to Chudu also had to be accounted for, so the values might not necessarily be accurate. Here in Tizhou, we can dispense with the escort and transportation of grain. However, to account for the increased expenses for upkeep of the granaries, the easiest way would be to combine the miscellaneous taxes and collect all amounts in standard taels of silver. The trade of grain is not a long-term endeavor either, Kongling said. Once Chazhou gets back on its feet, the people there should be able to begin tilling their lands by the start of next spring. If they can sow all their fields, they may have a bumper harvest. At that point, they will no longer need to buy grain from us. What about the other 4 prefectures? Yu Shaozai was still less familiar with Zhongbo than the rest. I can't imagine King Yi will be in the running for long. Fanzhou and Dengzhou are so poor, the people there are eating each other. Yet he's busy bestowing awards and conferring titles on the motley crew that passes for ministers in his court. If Chazhou no longer needs us, we can do business with them. The others laughed. Yo Jing truly hails from the Chief Surveillance Bureau, Shen Zichuan said. Seeing Yu Shaozai's puzzled look, Kongling took pity on him. When you see others conducting themselves dishonorably, you think first of impeachment. But remember, if they're so impoverished they're eating one another, how would they have money to buy our grain? Human trafficking is rampant in Fanzhou, Zhou Gui commented. If we tried to sell them grain, they might bring children for barter. These people are incorrigible. The mere mention of this subject filled him with contempt. The traffickers are indeed a problem, Yao Wenyu said, but the root of it lies with Mount Law. As for King Yi, he must live at all costs. He relaxed slightly and revealed a smile. He is our bulwark in the south. Without him, we'll come face to face with Qi Juyan. Speaking of the Grand Marshal, Yu Shaozai rolled up his cuffs. That reminds me, I heard some news. During the wedding ceremony for Qi Shiyu and Third Lady Hua, the old marshal was apparently so dazzled by his bride's beauty during the ceremony that he collapsed on the spot. Zhou Gui was stunned. He collapsed? He had a stroke, Yu Shaozai exclaimed. Whether Qi Shiyu's stroke was genuine or not, he clearly wouldn't be sharing a bed with Hua Xiangyi anytime soon. The Empress Dowager had managed to become in-laws with Qidong, but that was the limit of her power. If Hua Xiangyi didn't beget a male heir, Qi Juyan would retain her position as Grand Marshal. With her new stepmother in her hands, Qi Juyan had a legitimate reason to hold her brothers in check. The wording. Right, Blue, all I'm hearing is no wedding night. Like, great, that's great news. Excellent news. Man proposes, heaven disposes, Zhou Gui lamented. How fortunate Qi Juyin is not a man. They laughed and moved on to other topics. Kong Ling and Yu Xiaozai had just returned that day. Shen Zichuan couldn't in good conscience let them sit and chat the entire night. He dismissed them soon after midnight. Zhou Gui personally saw Kong Ling back to his courtyard and gave him a concise account of the clerk screening incident on the way. He executed the advisor who took bribes. Since then, the Yemen has been peaceful. But some new rumors have been popping up recently. They're saying the vice commander came to Zizhou to coerce me. Can you believe it? Heaven knows I can't eat or sleep well these days. I worry such words will make their way to the vice commander's ears and create a rift between us. Kong Ling held the umbrella steady over their heads. I advised you long ago to dispense with the title of prefect. If this had played out before someone more paranoid, we would have already lost the vice commander's trust. But, Zhou Gui fretted, I don't know what to change it to. It doesn't matter what you change it to. What's important is your attitude. Kong Ling tilted the umbrella to allow Zhou Gui to raise the lantern. Zizhou has already established itself as a regional power. The matter of its leadership can no longer be left ambiguous. You may not intend it, but rumors only grow. You must draw a clear line between master and subordinate, as soon as possible, and make it plain to all and sundry that Zizhou has changed hands. As they conversed, the two men climbed the steps to Kong Ling's residence. Their attendants trailed behind them. Before Kong Ling stepped onto the walkway, he turned and motioned for them to keep their distance. It's not appropriate to call him the Provincial Administration Commissioner, nor to call him the Supreme Commander. Think of a title for me, Zhou Gui said, following him impatiently, and I'll have it done tomorrow morning. Those are all titles bestowed by Chudu. Of course, they're not appropriate. Kong Ling couldn't think of one on the spot either. He stood for a moment, struggling to think, then finally said, Shen Wei was Prince of Jianxing, but he was stripped of his noble rank and title. We can't allow any association between him and the vice commander. They stood side by side in the chill night air, letting the wind rustle their clothes. Both shivered simultaneously. Tired and cold, Kong Ling shooed Zhou Gui off, saying, Go back and think of a title yourself. There is a scene break. 2 days later, Zhou Gui submitted a document with the request to change Shen Zichuan's title of vice commander to prefectural governor. He had initially meant to address him simply as Shen Jun, and there's a footnote, Jun, an address meaning lord. Simply as Shen Jun or Governor Shen, but the name Shen was associated too closely with Shen Wei. Thus he chose to add a more neutral, prefectural. In any case, adding prefectural made the title more flexible. It could be revised in the future if any change needed to be made. His proposal marked the first time Zizhou explicitly recognized Shen Zichuan as the de facto leader of the prefecture. Meanwhile, Zhou Gui demoted himself from his original position of prefect and became Shen Zichuan's subordinate. When the change was made public, King Yi of Fanzhou was first to become anxious upon hearing the news. He issued several notices in succession, angrily denouncing Zhou Gui for bending the knee to the traitor's son. But Zizhou now had Gao Zhongxiong, an eloquent writer of quick wit, who could convince anyone that black was white. Gao Zhongxiong wrote pamphlet upon pamphlet condemning King Yi for his heartless disregard for the lives of the commoners in Fanzhou, and prioritizing the wasteful construction of extravagant buildings for his own enjoyment. At the same time, He also composed a ballad for distribution to Zhongbo's 4 eastern prefectures. It told the story of how Shen Zichuan had suffered and been injured while traveling thousands of li to deliver life-saving grain to Chazhou. A ballad? Like he has a song now? So touching was this tale that it moved all who heard it to tears. The further the story spread, the more exaggerated it became. By the time the ballad reached Xiao Fengshu's ears, Shen Zichuan had appeared... Oh no. Let me try to read that again. By the time the ballad reached Xiao Fengshu's ears, Shen Zichuan had apparently sustained grave wounds and had nearly lost an arm amid his valiant struggle. Shocked, Xiao Fengshu ran out of his tent and shook Xiao Qie awake in the middle of the night, exclaiming, "He lost an arm?" Oh no. Xiao Qie, who had been diligently running mission after mission for half a month, without rest, had only just drifted off when his old man yanked him up. He was still half asleep. So Xiao Fengshu shook him and asked the question again. Annoyed at the jostling, Xiao Qie asked hoarsely, "Who lost an arm?" "Shen Zichuan." And the chapter being called Hearsay certainly makes sense. Oh god. Oh, poor Xiao Qie. Oh, this is awful. We're on page 157 for chapter 161, which is called Sunset Glow. Hi, trees with leaves. I don't know what this part is. Some of us are like reading for the first time and we like to not really like hint at things. I know that was incredibly vague, so I don't know what's going to happen from what you said, but we like to just like not even give potential hints to like, oh, a thing is about to happen. It was as though he had been doused with a bucket of icy water. Xiao Qie wasn't just awake. His hair was standing on end. He sat up and stared at Xiao Fengshu. Yet his mind was completely blank. As if he'd been punched so hard, even the insides of his chest had turned to mush. Oh, hi, Aspen. Oh, yeah, no, I understand. It's totally fine. He shoved Xiao Fengshu aside and tumbled off the cot to pull on his boots, but crashed against the corner of the table so hard he almost couldn't get up. And his damn boots were nowhere to be found. Chen Yang and Gu Jin, keeping watch outside the tent, heard the flap being lifted. Out stumbled Xiao Qie, resembling a wandering ghost with one boot on and one foot bare. He didn't even have his outer robe as he rushed to untie Snowcrest's reins. Gu Jin was quickest to react. He rushed forward to grab the reins and called, "Master." Chen Yang followed just behind, intending to head inside to look for the robe and boots. Xiao Fengshu stepped out, bewildered. "You didn't know? Didn't this happen a long time ago? When he went to Chazhou?" Observing Xiao Fengshu's expression, realization dawned on Chen Yang. He slapped his forehead and turned around, shouting, "Chazhou! Master, it was from Chazhou. Gongza is fine." The strident shouts shocked Xiao Qie's drifting soul back into his body. He turned and made a beeline for Xiao Fengshu, so anxious his eyes had gone red. When he was a few paces away, he spun around on the spot once before finally wiping his face as he exclaimed, "Good grief, my own damn father." I thought this was going to end in Xiao Qie, like, rushing to Zizhou to see Shen Zichuan, but I'm glad for his sake, of his own heart, that, like, everyone realized, like, oh, this can't be real. Good grief, my own damn father. And there's a scene break. The scabs on Shen Zichuan's palm had fallen off, leaving only a scar behind. After the 8th month passed, the rain in Zizhou ceased. The frost came heavier, and the weather grew colder. Yao Wenyu, having caught a small chill in recent days, remained indoors with a hand warmer and rarely ventured outside. Fei Sheng continued to follow Shen Sichuan around, while Li Xiong followed Ding Tao, and hardly ever mentioned Lei Jingzhe. Is Han Jin still in prison? Shen Sichuan had finished his medicine. He was gazing out the window and questioned Fei Sheng almost idly. He is, Fei Sheng confirmed. Master is benevolent to have spared his life, yet he continues to wail all day without so much as a word of repentance. Shen Sichuan turned the porcelain bowl in his hand and studied the pattern. Well, he is Han Cheng's younger brother. Fei Sheng lowered his eyes and unconsciously shivered. Han Cheng had killed Shi Huilian right in the middle of the street. Based on everything he deciphered about Shen Sichuan's temper, Fei Sheng had to assume Shen Sichuan was keeping Han Jin alive, not to exert leverage over Chudu, but for some greater purpose. What this was, Fei Sheng didn't dare guess, and had no wish to know. As a personal guard, he was merely Shen Sichuan's dagger. Shen Sichuan's wish was his command. Shen Sichuan raised his eyes, looking out the window at the cold rays of sunlight spilling over the ground, and leaving tear-stained trails through the frost. He flashed an enigmatic smile. Release him. Fei Sheng murmured acknowledgement. Give him a bath and a change of clothes, then feed him and offer him a soft bed, Shen Sichuan added. He doesn't need to do anything. Let him play to his heart's content. Fei Sheng didn't dare object and merely nodded before taking his leave. The moment he left, Chao Tianya lifted the curtain and entered. A letter from Li Bei. Chao Tianya set the envelope on Shen Sichuan's desk. Sent post-haste. It must be an important message for Master. Is Yuan Zhuo doing any better? Shen Sichuan asked as he opened the letter. Before Chao Tianya could reply, he saw Shen Sichuan's stunned expression. He appeared to read the letter several times. It's about the winter trade market. Shen Sichuan paused. I have to go to the front lines in person to speak with the Prince of Li Bei. There's another scene break. The weather in Li Bei was capricious. Bright, clear days were scarce in autumn, but the instant the sun did appear, it would become so hot one itched to strip off their clothes. Xiao Qia had returned to the front lines again at the end of the 8th month, and he remained there for the time being. After his defeat, he hadn't rested for a moment. Whether it was heading north to transport military supplies, or riding west to contact the homeland, he'd personally led his men on every trip. Xiao Fengshu's castigation seemed to have sanded down all his rough edges, to the point that he now willingly served as a minor supplies general. When Chen Yang went to fetch water, he saw Xiao Qia standing amid the withered yellow grass, breaking a horse. Or rather, he was meant to be breaking it, but in reality Xiao Qia was being far gentler than usual with this animal. Snow white with a patch of black on its chest. It was the horse Lu Yizhi had set aside for Xiao Qia's wife. That's the one that's, is it like the opposite in coloring of Snowcrest? I know there was a horse like that. I think that was that one. For the past month, Xiao Qia had brought the horse with him everywhere while carrying out his assignments. He wanted to train it himself. Oh, it is that one, okay. Yeah, he's being gentle with the horse. Xiao Fengshu came riding over from the opposite direction, and Meng swooped down through the wind and brushed past Xiao Fengshu, ruffling his hair. He then took off again, gliding along the tips of the grass before soaring into the air, where he wheeled once before flying away. Xiao Fengshu dismounted and threw his reins to the deputy general behind him. He took off his helmet, spat out the grit in his mouth, and narrowed his eyes as he watched Xiao Qia. After a moment, he removed his heavy armor and took the saddle off his horse. He then flipped back atop it, riding bareback, and beckoned Xiao Qia over. Zuo Qianqiu leaned over the paddock railing, his white hair fluttering in the wind, as he watched father and son challenging each other. Wu Ziyu ran over and leapt up to straddle the railing. Behind him, the men of the Libe armored cavalry and imperial army crowded around, packed like sardines along the rails. Tantai Hu was so squashed he couldn't even free his hands. He craned his neck and hollered, "What's this about?" Wu Ziyu waved the steamed bun he was eating and shouted hoarsely over the din. "If our Gongzo wins today, the supply squadron will be treated like lords this month. They'll have to give us 2 more scoops for our meals." Zuo Qianqiu laughed at this back and forth. It'll be a few years more before Aya can defeat his old man. "Our Gongzo won't let us down," Tantai Hu cried, wiping at the sweat that had trickled down his cheek. His face shone dark and flushed in the scorching heat. "What if the prince wins?" Zuo Qianqiu asked. Chen Yang was about to answer when Tantai Hu shouted over him, "Then we'll run along the grassland and bark." Wu Ziyu and Gu Jin leapt forward to clap their hands over his mouth. But Zuo Qianqiu didn't let the opportunity slip. "Fine. Ah, yeah, you hear that? If you lose to your father today, your whole squad will have to bark for us." Xiao Qie lifted his fingers and whistled, and Snowcrest trotted to his side. He mounted his horse and asked Xiao Fengshu, "Where to?" Seeming to think for a moment, Xiao Fengshu repeated, "Where to?" But before the words had fully left his mouth, he had set his heels to his horse's sides, and shot off into the distance. The Imperial army booed. Tantai Hu struggled to free his mouth and exclaimed, "His lordship cheated." Snowcrest sprang forward like a black arrow, leaving the bowstring, kicking up a gust in its wake. The sun in that clear sky was blinding on the horizon, and the backs of father and son as they galloped away were almost identical. Meng broke through the clouds and chased after them, sticking close to Xiao Qie as he looked down upon that pair of dark arrows, one in front and one behind. Blades of grass went flying under the horse's hooves, while the wind stirred the endless expanse of the plain, bending the stalks with its passage. They rode through the undulating grass like a pair of stars, one large and one small, falling into the waves of the ocean, leaving a long trail in their wake as they cut through the grasslands. Sometimes I'm just like, why? Why is the writing so good? Why is the writing so good? Also, there is art. First art of the stream, I believe. Potentially the only art of the stream. Gorgeous, as always. Xiao Qie gazed at Xiao Fengshu's back, the wind rustling in his ears. Xiao Fengshu hadn't grown old. How could he? He looked so strong and robust, no different than he had 20 years ago when he would lift one son in each arm, his laughter booming over the grasslands as he tossed them until they cried. Gradually, Xiao Qie caught up to him. Snowcrest was sturdier and younger than the horse beneath Xiao Fengshu. It charged forth with vigor, eyes focused only on what lay ahead, as if nothing could stop it. Slowly the two came neck and neck, both horses running until they were lathered. The sun blazed overhead, searing the backs of both horses and riders. Perhaps this would be the last day of scorching sun in Li Bei this year. A stone monument marked the finishing point, engraved with the names of the Li Bei armored cavalry who had died in battle the previous year, along with the falcons fallen with them, and the battle steeds that had carried them. At the very last moment, just as their horses' hooves stretched out toward the shadow of the marker, Meng beat them to it and darted across the finish line. He circled once before landing on the monument, claiming first place. "The falcon is mine," Xiao Qie slowed down, "so I win. The land is mine." Xiao Fengshu wheeled the horse around and pointed at his feet. "I was here 800 years earlier than you." Xiao Qie coolly ignored this statement. They dismounted. The sun was making its downward descent in the west. Xiao Fengshu climbed the low stone steps and stood before the monument, then reached out to wipe away the dust. The wind was strong here. It tousled the hair at his temples, revealing streaks of white. Herein lie my brothers. Xiaoqia came up and stood behind him. 10 years ago, I brought your brother here. Xiao Fengshu pointed to a spot on the stone. There was a boy here with a rather unique name of Sui Ning. He was the same age as your brother. Old names on the monument were scraped off every year and replaced with new ones. The act signified that generation after generation of the Libe armored cavalry had existed here, and that generation after generation had vanished here. With its back to the Hongyan Mountains, the stone monument lay in eternal rest. The souls it memorialized were the Hongyan Mountains wind and the Hongyan Mountains stars. I want to be right here. Xiaoqia pointed to the center. It's a spacious spot. The location is good, and you can see far into the distance. That's my spot, Xiao Fengshu said pettily. I want all the spots here. What about my mother? Xiaoqia turned his head to scrutinize Xiao Fengshu. You'll be leaving her alone in the homeland. Xiao Fengshu didn't respond. He gazed past the monument toward the Hongyan Mountains. Then, as if dazzled by the setting sun, he turned away, back toward the Libe homeland. He could barely open his eyes for the wind. We can look at each other from afar, eyes to eyes, forevermore. Xiaoqia followed his gaze. It is here we are born, and here we will die. The people of Libe lie in the mountains and rivers, with their faces tipped to the blazing sun. Doesn't matter if they're men or women. The iron bones in the sunlight belong to unyielding heroes. Xiao Fengshu opened his palm, and the wind brushed his skin so gently it felt like the silky black hair of his wife. This was the only indulgence he had allowed himself in the past decades. One day, I will return to her embrace. Xiaoqia looked out at the waves of billowing grass. There seemed to be no end to that yellow sea. The sorrow of parting and the joy of reunion that belonged to every person alive was merely a fleeting moment in the timelessness of the universe. In the blink of an eye, they too would disintegrate. From then on, all would be silent, every trace of the time they'd shared gone. How precious was an encounter between two people. Xiao Fengshu turned and punched Xiaoqia on the shoulder, then pulled his son into a tight hug. But he let go quickly and said, If you want to surpass me, you still need a few years. Who knows? Xiaoqia patted his own chest and straightened to his full height. Xiao Fengshu took a few steps and bent as if to pick something off the ground. Being pelted with horse dung had left Xiaoqia with lasting trauma. He promptly turned tail and run. Xiao Fengshu burst out laughing. Henry, you're so right. The soft wind caressing him just like his wife's inky black hair. Oh, I know, he was just like Xiaoqia in love. Absolutely. Also, ouch. Yeah, I agree, Blue. Can someone remind me where Xiaoqia's mother is from? The wind was still blowing as father and son made their way back, bathed in the glow of the setting sun. Daylight lingered on the horizon as they returned the horses to the paddock. Drenched in sweat, Xiaoqia stripped off his upper garments and went down to the river to bathe. The surface of the water glimmered in the dying light. As he raised the wooden bucket to pour water over himself, ripples of gold danced over the muscles on his back. Xiaoqia bent and rinsed his dented arm guard in the river. The iron had warped to the point that it was no longer usable, but he hadn't changed it out. When he took it out of the water, he untied the frayed dog-hide cord and turned. Hand me the... A travel-worn Shen Zichuan stood at the top of the riverbank, the sunset glow spilling over the hems of his robe, still covered with bits of grass. Xiaoqia had missed him so much. And now here he stood before Xiaoqia, in the moment before the last rays of the setting sun slipped below the edge of the world. Blue, I agree with you. This cliffhanger is the evilest one we've had, period. We're stopping here for today. That's where we end for today. Are you for real? Did I miss? I feel like for some reason I misunderstood how far away the trade market was. I thought it was going to be longer before we got to it, so I was just like, wait a minute, what is he doing there? But okay. Oh my goodness. Henry, you said you're so glad I'm a rereader. I went gay into this chapter. Oh, Blue, you said them mating again after how precious was an encounter between two people makes you so nervous. It feels like foreshadowing, but I hope it's the good kind. I hope so too. Oh boy, I hope so too. Huh. Oh my god. Okay. That just like hit me like some bricks, and I'm just like, oh, we gotta wait until Wednesday. Well, when we come back on Wednesday, we will be on chapter 162, which is called Trade Market. Oh my goodness. And you said Henry, I think you said perhaps the only one I can't remember. Wait, no, I don't know. I guess I don't know if anyone knew where Xiaoqia's mother is from. I know, like, that's information that we know at this point. It just probably was brought up who knows how long ago, and I've forgotten because there's so much information. Blue, you'd be climbing up the walls if you hadn't read this volume before. Yeah, I kind of feel like doing that. I just have to hold out until Wednesday. At least it's 2 days. At least this isn't the Wednesday stream and we're ending here, because then I would die. So yeah. Thank y'all for coming. Oh, Aspen, you're rereading, so you can be prepared for volume 7. Yeah, oh my goodness. Volume 7 is not out yet, right? But it's coming out soon, I think. Oh, 2 days. Wow, okay. That's soon. Huh. Oh, it came out last week. Oh, Blue, you were talking about my stream. It came out last week. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I haven't super paid attention because obviously I can't read ahead. I have, like, a shipment of books that I got, and some of them were pre-orders and some of them weren't. And they're coming, finally, like, they'll all be ready and come here, like, sometime after May 19th or something like that. And that's going to include volume 7. Yeah, whoa. Like, Tong Jo Ching is just like, it's like just the way that she writes and the way that it's translated here is so perfectly, I don't even know. I can't deal with it sometimes. You're not, Blue, you said you're not reading the rest until you have volume 8. Yeah. Okay. And then, yeah, volume 8 releases sometime in August. I think that's right. Which is why I'm gonna have to have a break between QJJ reading something at like 2 volumes of something really short, and then going back to the final volume. Yeah, that quote from about the wind and feeling, like his wife's hair and everything. I'm like, oh, I gotta add that one. I gotta add that one to the break document. Yeah, Vase of Peonies. Golden Terrace is short, but that would be okay. If I did that, I would be reading one volume of Golden Terrace and then going to QJJ 8. Because I think Golden Terrace 2 is not out yet. Or won't be out yet. I don't remember. I don't know. I was thinking of, like, I was gonna do River Bay Road and just do 2 volumes, because that's all it is 2 volumes. And then go back to QJJ. I could also just do 1 volume of something, because I think that gives me enough time. Or I could do, like, 2 volumes of Scum Villain, and then later, at the next break point, finish it. But I don't know what I'm gonna do yet. There's options. Blue, it might overtake Arha and TGCF. Take the first spot, depending on how it ends. Yeah, I'm like, if we can just hold up this level of quality of writing and plotting through till the very end, then I will absolutely say this is my favorite Danmei. I already kind of feel like it's my favorite Danmei, but I don't want to, like, make that decision yet. Yeah. Yeah, I have some time to decide what I'm gonna do. Henry, you said River Bay, I whisper in your ear. Like, the thing about doing River Bay at that point is it would be like a nice chill break from all the plotting and the politicking into just something like totally different and fun. But then Scum Villain is also like fun and would be a nice break if I did the first 2 of that. So I don't know. Yeah, I know, that's why you read it. I know. Yeah. And Scum Villain is happening at some point either way. And if I were to do Scum Villain first, I guess I would read River Bay Road later at some point. I have, when would this break be? It would be, wait, I'm gonna pull up my calendar really quick. Because we're in volume 5 now. And then we still need to read 6 and 7. So... Ugh. Yeah, I think it would be in July, or like the end of June, going into July to mid or late July or something like that. Somewhere around there. Yeah. Oh, you said Kichter would call her stream day Sunday scum day, Monday scum day on here. Oh, that's great. I love that. Yeah, right now, my list to be read on this channel eventually is Scum Villain and TGCF and River Bay Road and I do want to do Golden Terrace. I think maybe I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that one because I might want to just save that one for reading myself. So I don't know. And there's so many other things. And then also the fish book. Sometime way down the line is fish book too. Oh, Henry, I read volume 1 of Legend of Exorcism. If I wait a long time, I could do it on stream. But I know Legend of Exorcism Volume 1 so well, because I also watched the Donghua first, and it just, for some reason, it's stuck in my head to the point that it feels more... Like, doing it would feel more, I don't know, like, not a reaction than TGCF. For some reason in my head, it's just, like, the way that it's stuck around with me. But, that does remind me, I do need to finish reading that at some point. I also, like... hot take, I guess, Legend of Exorcism. I like the plot. I don't really like the writing, or maybe it's that translation, but something about it, I was just like, I don't know. it was like everything just kind of felt really straightforward to a degree that I didn't like. I don't know if that makes any sense. But that's just something I'm like reading on my own. Um, the problem too is that I start so many different books, just like my own personal reading, and so my list of like what I'm technically currently reading and need to finish is like absolutely freaking massive. It's just like a lot. Oh yeah, Henry, you said you can only speak for River Bay, but you enjoyed Fago's writing style in that. See, River Bay is such a different type of thing, and Faga is so prolific that I don't expect, like, oh, I didn't really like his writing in this one book, so I'm not going to like the others. Like, I absolutely want to read, like, his other stuff. And I do want to finish Legend of Exorcism at some point. But yeah. You said... Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's not the same vibe as Meat Bun or Tong Jo Ching. I don't expect it to be. I think part of it too is like once I read the second book, I probably won't feel that way as much anymore because as soon as I get to the second book, I don't know any of the plot anymore. Because we're past the point of the Donghua and everything. So I'll probably enjoy it better just because I won't know like everything that is going to happen like practically play by play, except for like the things that they had to censor. And I don't know, the Donghua is like not, doesn't feel super censored in some respects. Oh, Henry, you said your only complaint about MXTX's works, especially TGCF, is there's not enough friendship. Definitely, there is a lot of friendship, and I do really like that. It's like very like found family, everything. Oh, thank you, Henry. So yeah. Today was something like also I was I was trying not to, but like when we were in Xiao Fengshu's little like monologue, I was like this close to crying, and then I was like, no. But that was a lot. But yeah, so I'm gonna see you on Wednesday. Thank you so much for coming to the stream. Have a good rest of your day.